Good morning, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for making it out to this event as part of the Hub Live at Climate Week NYC. And this is the first event, the first session in our green room on nature, climate and health. My name is Jeroen Gerlach. I'm the Director of Climate Group Europe, our youngest office in Amsterdam. And I'm the systems lead on food. And food is one of the 4 focus systems for Climate Group. And we want to shift demand and shift diets towards more sustainable, lower emissions food, together with our corporates, which is, we have some 70 food and beverage corporates already in our network, but then also working together with the governments in our network, the subnational governments of the Under 2 coalition. And we're going to look at bringing together these corporates and governments to make changes and learning from each other in terms of food procurement. And that's what we're talking about here today as well. Because governments, and also the governments in the network that we run, can create tipping points when we talk about food procurement. They can make a difference. They can create new markets. And about 10 or 20% of government procurement can be food. So that's a lot of input and a lot of mandate that governments can have. And today, we're going to talk with 6 panelists, 2 times 3, on food procurement by subnational governments together with corporates. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the first panel, which is Minister Hugh Iranka Davies, from Deputy First Minister and Cabinet Secretary for Climate Change and Rural Affairs for the Welsh Government. Welcome. Sandra Paquet, Local Procurement Advisor for the Institute of Tourism and Hospitality of Quebec, and Henry Fauvargue, VP Sustainability at Cisco. Can I ask you to come to the stage, please? And give them a warm applause. Yes, thank you. And I'll be actually joining you on one of these luxurious seats. Minister Iranka Davies, I wanted to start with some questions to you, the Welsh Government. You worked for many years in public and private sector leisure management, and currently, amongst your many responsibilities, are, for instance, developing the Welsh food sector, but also looking at the associated supply chains and commitments and targets in that food supply chain. And my first question to you would be, you worked and work on procurement of sustainable products, and in this case, food, which is part of that. How do you do that? How do you work sustainably on food procurement in the Welsh Government?
I think it's really based on practical, deliverable actions. Yeah, you can't just wish this, you've got to actually do it.
Yeah.
And one of the ways is you approach your procurement in a very different way. You set the guidelines very differently. So we have literally rewritten the guidance. So within procurement, we're not going to be alone in that scale of the reach of public procurement through the supply chain is significant in Wales. It is schools, it is hospitals, it is prisons, it is so much more. The reach is massive. But one of the challenges, how do you, when faced with a traditional model of procurement based purely on cost,
yeah,
how do you enlarge that to actually say, well, actually, we want to drive social and local economic, as opposed to wider local economic and environmental imperatives as well? So we rewrote the guidance to do that. It is having significant benefits, but it's also, quite interestingly, it's being driven as well by the wider consumer imperative. It's not simply that we're driving it through procurement. We are having people saying, we want to see, really. Yeah. So Wales is a green and pleasant land, okay, famously. If anybody's visited there, we do tend to have a lot of rainfall, but we're good at producing food. But in doing that, what we found is the Welsh brand. If you put a red dragon, that's our national flag, on products, consumers want it, on the shelves as well as in procurement. Same applies in procurement. We're increasingly having supply chain partners saying, we want to source locally. So we've done the guidance, we've worked with also the skills within procurement teams, because that's one of the biggest challenges, is upskilling National Health Service, our National Health Service, local procurement officers, and in local authorities and so on, to give them the skills to work in a more complex arena. That complex arena is to do with saying you don't have to accept the biggest cost saving, that big file on the shelf that says, here's who you go to. We work with them and with the supply chain now to say we can bring together local suppliers, very local. So we're seeing the real dividends of this at the moment. And it's driving forward. Some of you may not know a lot about Wales, but some of you may have heard some other places. Caerphilly is one. Caerphilly is a very famous cheese. So the reason I mention that is Caerphilly is one of the local authorities now that is delivering impressive results. They place more emphasis now on that issue of that bigger local impact, shorter supply chains, and it is delivering. So, for example, here, let me look at my notes here. They've turned it around now. Out of 150 lots within their procurement as a local authority, and they're quite a big local authority in Wales, 100 of those were picked up with suppliers who are focusing on local supply chains. So we're driving down the carbon emissions, we're rewarding local fresh produce, and we're doing it within the rules of the game, but it's giving the skills and the steer to say, do this, there's more value to be held in this and driving down carbon emissions.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I could talk about more, but it's a job of work to be done, but we're seeing real gains in Wales now by doing this.
Yeah, and you mentioned local supply chains. I also understood that in Wales you have one of the first deforestation-free schools, yeah, which is then more a global approach of food procurement. How do you do that? Well, working globally?
Well, yeah. Well, this is where, and this is the power of gatherings like this. We learn from each other. We definitely do not have all the solutions, and we're keen to learn from others. But Wales is part of a four nations approach. We're part of the United Kingdom, but we have taken great pride in trying to drive forward initiatives. One of those is called Size of Wales. You're probably familiar with this. We often hear people say, well, this area of deforestation that we've seen, we're seeing that the size of Wales every so many, okay. Yeah. So size of Wales becomes a unit of measurement. We've set, with our support, Welsh Government support, we set up several years ago the size of Wales, and one of the things that they're now pushing on heavily is working in schools to have schools champion measures against deforestation by these initiatives with food on the plate in schools as well. Yeah. So they link up with the program with toolkits for teachers, toolkits for the students, and it is to do not only with supply chains and what food, so we have veg in schools programs that they work with, but it's also to do with, they link directly up then with communities, indigenous communities in nations facing deforestation, so they learn about why they're doing it as well, and they become much better informed citizens. Our first one is underway. It's a school in Monmouth in Wales. We've got 5 others in the pipeline. And what we're looking for is to roll this out further across Wales, to have all our schools championing measures against deforestation, and also then championing local food and local procurement and shorter supply chains. Yeah,
yeah. And I forgot to mention actually that the Welsh Government, Wales is also a proud member of the Under 2 coalition. So the collaboration is there with other subnational governments as well. As a last question to you, if you have savings, emission savings as part of your food procurement, do you measure that up in your total commitments that you have as a government? So does it add up to your total climate work?
It is. We pull this alongside all other measures we're trying to do right across cabinet portfolios. It's quite interesting coming here now as recently appointed Deputy First Minister with the climate change portfolio as well. I think that's quite significant for us in Wales. It's a real signal. But we also have my predecessor, was Julie James, who some of you will know, equally committed. Yeah. She's now the Minister for Delivery in Welsh Government. Yeah. We're terrified of her. She will drive us.
In a good way, I hope.
And this becomes part of the collective total of our contributions.
Yeah, so it's a collaboration between ministries.
Right across.
Right across.
And also, by the way, we're quite excited by, and I know they'll be here later this week, the new UK government coming forward, how we can engage with them. But more importantly, it's actually local government partners, supply chain partners within Wales. We are genuinely doing some really great stuff in this, and we think this is one area where our lessons can help inform England, can help collaborate with Scotland on what they're doing in similar things as well. That's the benefit, is learning from each other, and then we all lift. We all lift together.
Yeah, fully agreed. Couldn't agree more. So thank you, Minister, for your insights. Next set of questions to Sandra, next to me. Sandra Paquet, you're working as a local procurement advisor for the Institute of Tourism and Hospitality of Quebec. So you work with the government of Quebec. And prior to this, you worked, for instance, with Compass Group, a food service company. So with, as I understood, a range of experience from chef to procurement and everything. So really on-the-ground experience there as well. My first question would be, what do you do on food procurement when you work with the government of Quebec? So what is your strategy in food procurement there?
So in 2020, the Department of Food, Agriculture and Fisheries of the Government of Quebec spearheaded a new strategy that aimed the food services within the public institutions. So the phase 1 aimed school cafeterias, all of our health system, and also higher education. This strategy is called the National Strategy for Purchasing Quebec Foods, which I loosely translated from French. And its main goal is that 100% of these institutions set a local food sourcing target for themselves. So that is when the Institute of Tourism and Hospitality of Quebec, and amongst other partners, were tasked with enforcing on the field this new policy. So that's when ITHQ created a team of 10 local procurement advisors, like myself, and we are based all around the province and have very different expertise and backgrounds. So we have created and developed a database that we use to quantify and categorize all of the food purchases that the institutions make. And we can determine the origin of every product an institution can buy. And so once we've determined the potential of the local food sourcing in an institution, we then set a local food sourcing target with the institution to increase the initial score. And once that part of the service is done, we then have 3 main actions to complete the sustainability approach. So 1, we tackle GHG emissions by reducing food waste and taking the actual menu and making it greener. 2, we include sustainable criteria in the public tender and in the whole purchasing process. And 3, we implement direct buying when the costs are below thresholds. So we can enforce and prioritize shorter circuits and support local farmers and local brands. So we also worked with companies like Hydro-Quebec, casinos, and we hope that the second phase will aim childcare services and municipalities. It's important to say that the service is completely free, it's completely government funded for the public institutions, and after 4 years on the field, we are at 92%. So 92% of the public institutions in phase 1 have set a local target for themselves, and most have reached them already.
Wow. And those targets, are they also connected to a wider Quebec target? So are they feeding into your overall target of emission savings?
Yes, so in Quebec, we have the National Biopolicy, and we also have the 2030 Plan for a Green Economy, in which there's a section on agriculture that specifies the importance of prioritizing food that do have a lower carbon emission footprint. And in Quebec, we do have a great source of renewable energy. So a strategy on local food combined with sustainable delivery can help Quebec meet its GHG reduction emission targets.
Great, yeah, great. And so a very data-driven approach, a very measurable approach. What are challenges that you came across and how did you overcome them?
many
Yeah.
challenges
Yeah.
and obstacles.
We wouldn't be here if there weren't, but yeah.
Exactly. Especially in the beginning. I would say lack of resources within the public institutions. So time, money, staff, resistance to change also, and wanting to change habits, that's always difficult. We have created 5 online free training programs for kitchen staff and management. To help them with all kinds of different subjects. And the fact that the advisors are also mostly previously from the food service industry helps make buyers comfortable. There's also another hurdle is the misconception on the public buyer's end that if they include public sustainable criteria within the public tender, they will close or restrict the market too much. But we have learned that most suppliers do have a sustainability approach. So the way we're overcoming this hurdle is communicating, making information available, making it more simpler for the buyer to understand and be comfortable, including sustainable criteria in the public tenders.
Yeah. Great, and hearing you both from a government perspective, collaboration is key, both within the government, but also exchanging knowledge with other governments and other organizations. And then coming to you, Henry, the corporates as well, the role of corporates. So Henry, you're Vice President of Sustainability at Cisco, and that's the food company, not the IT company. And you're responsible for Cisco's global sustainability strategy and the company-wide implementation of that. And before you worked at the Boston Consulting Group, where you also worked on retail, climate and sustainability. So very connected CV there. How does Cisco partner and enable governments and other customers to transition to more sustainable and lower emissions food? We heard it from both parties. You cannot not work with corporates. So how do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's all about offering choice, and it's about providing that data that you just talked about. So for those of you that don't know Cisco, we are really at the center of the food ecosystem. We have over 10,000 different suppliers of food, and we have over 500,000 customer locations, which include, many in both of your, jurisdictions. We really want to, I think you said the right thing, tangible examples. What we look to do as Cisco is really procure sustainable and local foods and then provide the data so that our customers can find them. So we've had lots of dialogues with both of your governments and other governments on, okay, what are you looking for? What policies are coming down the pipe? How can we serve you better? And then what we do is we act as the connector to go to our suppliers to say, hey, our customers are looking for lower carbon foods, as an example. A good example of a tangible thing that we've been working on is, most of you probably know this, we're in an informed climate room, right? Beef is one of the most carbon-emitting foods that we have on our plates today. Not everyone's going to move from beef to plant-based. Some people might move from beef to chicken, which can get you sometimes 10 times lower emissions if you do that. But some folks are going to continue eating beef. So what is our role as Cisco? To go and find the lower carbon beef, to work with those local suppliers who are implementing regenerative practices, or work with the national suppliers who are looking to change their processes and the way that they create beef, and then to offer it with the right data, the right validation into government entities and all of our other customers with that validity and the confidence and the trust that it is actually lower carbon and more sustainable. So that's kind of how our role in the supply chain and how we think about it. So
it's and the data that you have, you share it with your customers or with others. Is this data also being fed in by customers? So is it a
it's a partnership throughout the supply chain. So first we work both sides. So first we'll go downstream to our customers and say, what are you looking for? How can we help? I mean, the best way we can drive sustainability is when it's linked to our business results. So being able to actually work with governments and our customers, you mentioned Compass, Sodexo is going to be on the next panel. It's great to work with customers who really care about this and consumers in colleges, universities, hospitals, and others that really care about this so we can start bringing it through. So yes, we look downstream. What data do you want? Sometimes it's which certifications are on your food. Is it Rainforest Alliance? Is it regenerative organic certified? Is it another certification? Or is it quantified data like the carbon emissions associated with food? We then work upstream with our suppliers to go and get that data.
Yeah.
So we have a supplier hub where our suppliers provide that data. We then feed that in and then build the connections to our customers so we can feed it downstream. We're actually becoming reasonably high-tech now. We now have automated data flows with some of our customers, so we can actually feed that downstream straight away.
Yeah.
So it becomes much more dynamic in terms of actually finding that food. One last piece is we now have a sustainable assortment. It's been live for a year on our e-commerce. You can actually filter by up to 80 certifications on our e-commerce to find what products are. I mentioned Rainforest Alliance certification. We have over 1,000 products that have that certification. Being able to find that on our e-commerce is really important.
Yeah, and so also in that database, if I call it simply like this, are facts about emission savings or, yeah. And you gave one example, beef, which is obviously, a high emitter. Do you have any other examples where you can change menus in quite a simple way and then gain emissions back or have lower emissions?
Yeah, I mean, we're also working with our dairy suppliers as well. So dairy is a great example where, we've got plant-based alternatives in our menu. They're one of the fastest growing sustainable alternatives. With beef, as we all know, there have been some concerns around the plant-based alternatives with regards to health and nutrition. We've really been trying to tackle that by looking at the health and nutrition of our more sustainable products to make sure that there's no compromise there. You are getting healthier, more nutritious, and more sustainable alternatives. And the plant-based milk is a great example.
Yeah.
Having that range of oat, of soy, of coconut, of other milks in our supply chain to be able to make sure that you're getting what your consumer's looking for and that you're minimizing that trade-off as much as possible is one of the things that we are really focusing on.
Great, thanks. Well, thank you all three. I see that we have some 40 seconds left for the second panel. I think in general, collaboration, data and data sharing best practices, but also very much governments and corporates working together, in this case on food procurement, setting the right standards, but also following them up together. Yeah, if I sum it up well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
A big applause for panel number one. And can I please call to the stage panel number two, Mateus Simoes, if I pronounce that correctly, Vice Governor of the State of Minas Gerais, Niti Jain, Strategic Partnerships Advisor for the City of New York City's Mayor's Office of Food Policy, and Jessica Sinkowski, VP for Sustainability at Sodexo. A warm applause. I think, Jessica, if I can start with you. So we already talked about the role of corporates and food companies in this collaboration of food procurement. You're head of sustainability at Sodexo North America, right?
Yes.
And you're with Sodexo 3 years, but you have a huge experience in procurement in general, which I found really interesting because food procurement is a specific thing, but then procurement, in general, having that expertise is really great. And you have a focus on the US and Canada in the work that you do, right?
That's correct.
My first question would be, can you talk about Sodexo's partnership with governments? How do you work together there? What are the challenges that you see? What are the advantages that you have in collaborating there?
Sure. Well, as Sodexo is a global food service and facilities management provider, we work with a number of governments across the world. And in the U.S. in particular, one of our largest clients is the United States Marine Corps, for example. And so you'll see Sodexo often in the kitchen as either the chefs, the sous chefs, the service providers of dishwashing services, janitorial staff, doing a number of things in the kitchen and on site. And so it's really important that we have a strong alliance with our customers, our clients, as we call them, in terms of making sure we understand what their needs are and what they're looking for. And so we can then really bring to the table a number of solutions that cover everything from how to serve the food to certainly what we're procuring on the plate. And as you mentioned early in the conversation, the impact of food is so important for climate. So we're taking a very strong interest in making sure that we can bring more lower carbon meals, including plant-based and plant-forward, to those clients.
Right. Yeah, thanks. And so you said it, you're a global food service company. So how important is the fact that you have different target groups, different people across the globe? Food is a very cultural product. It's a very history-related product. So how important is that for a company, and how do you work with that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's where we start. We know the food has to be delicious, otherwise it's a fail regardless of what you're trying to serve. So that's absolutely where we start. And as one example, we worked with the city of New York at the New York City Health and Hospitals to help to transform their menus to plant-based. And this is across a number of boroughs, 11 different neighborhoods. The menus at each of those hospitals is not the same because the people are not the same and what they want to eat is not the same. And so we work with each individual site to understand what those patients would want, what the doctors and the nurses would want, and we customize the menus to help support those culturally significant foods that are going to really help someone through their recovery process and help them be comfortable with eating a plant-based meal that they might not have intended to come in and have that type of service. And we were very intentional on making sure that we saw success with this. So we did intensive surveys to understand their satisfaction rates to make sure that we were meeting those needs.
Yeah, and this is something that you can then replicate in other areas if it's fitting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But it always starts with making sure that food is delicious, and that means meeting the palates of the people at those individual sites.
Yeah, and I believe that Sodexo was also a partner for the Olympic Games. Did this also have to do with, because that's bringing together a lot of people from various cultures and backgrounds, did this also help your knowledge there and your expertise?
Yeah, absolutely. So you may have heard that we opened the world's largest restaurant for the Olympic Games, serving the athletes, but also we serve the fans through the Olympics. And we made sure that we had culturally relevant meals for all of the participating countries there, which was no easy task, but I think certainly a fun one to think about how to make delicious food that can appeal to that many different cultures. And that takes variety and different options in terms of the different types of sauces that you might provide or the sides so that everybody could find something that they appreciate. And
again, assuming that this is also data backed up, in saying that you know what type of food, what menu will have X emissions, and how can you bring them down by tweaking a menu.
Yeah, absolutely, and some fun ways, in my opinion, that we took into account, making sure that we are lowering our carbon footprint, was to make sure that we are sourcing local from local farms within France. We had a target there. And my favorite fun fact was that we made sure that through our procurement process that our suppliers and our farmers understood that we were okay taking their ugly fruit and their ugly vegetables, that we would use that for the Olympics, and that they shouldn't discard that. So that was one of the ways that we had to think through that full process, that full cycle. Yeah, so food waste in that sense is also an important element of the work, assuming that you all do in the fight against emissions, if I can put it like this. I think in general, we talked about collaborations. You collaborate with the parties that you deliver to, including the governments. So, we talked about it a little bit before, but can you replicate the success, for instance, that you do with the City of New York? Is this something that you actively do, or do you foresee that we need more collaboration there? Yeah, so absolutely, it's an intentional process that we follow. We certainly learn each time we do it, but there is a process that we follow, and that includes that deep stakeholder engagement. So, but also, for example, not just with the people who are going to eat the food. We also have to educate our staff to make sure that they know how to serve the food, and to not say, "Would you like an extra piece of steak on that?" If our goal with our clients is to make sure we're lowering the carbon footprint. So there's that education of the staff and keeping the staff motivated and helping them understand why we are serving these types of foods, for example. So I think that's a really key component of that. But we have a specific process that we do for that, and that includes a lot of training components to make sure that our staff understands, what's important and the relevance of why they're making those changes. Yeah, great. Thank you very much. Yeah, Niti.
So again, strategic partnerships advisor for the New York City Mayor's Office of Food. So we're in New York now, so very fitting. You have a background as an environmental scientist and an environmental justice practitioner. So you worked a lot, I'm assuming, also on the just transition side of food. We heard an example already, but what does New York City do on food procurement? Some of the best practices, the challenges that you came across, the solutions that you found? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I love getting to work for the Office of Food Policy because I think our impact is really impressive. So New York City spends about $500,000 a year on food procurement, and that's across public schools, hospitals, correctional facilities, shelters, older adult centers. So that's a lot of money that we want to make sure is aligned with the values that we have as a city. And we have a program called the Good Food Purchasing Initiative, and that has tenets and values like a valued workforce or investing in local economies and also environmental sustainability. So when we align our procurement with those values, we know that the dollars are going towards the kinds of food systems that we want to build, and also actually advancing our food and climate goals. So New York City made a commitment to reduce our food-based carbon emissions by 33% by 2030, and that was after we found that food is the third largest contributor to our city's carbon footprint. So after we made that commitment, we really tried to implement a sustainable food strategy across our city agencies. And the way we've been doing that, as folks have talked about already, is to be plant forward as a city and to really reduce the emissions from the highest emitting food ingredients. So across all of our agencies, we have programs that help guide diners towards more sustainable choices. So in the public schools, we have things like Plant-Powered Fridays, where kids are not only learning about the food and where it comes from, but also making a choice towards a greener and more sustainable plate. We have our flagship initiative, which I'll definitely talk about, which is at the New York City Health and Hospital System that Jessica mentioned a little bit before. And then across all agencies, we have requirements for the food called the food standards, where we require certain serving each week of whole, minimally processed plant-based proteins and phasing out processed meat. So across all of these initiatives, we actually just got the numbers that we've been able to reduce emissions from food by 29% already since 2019. So we're very much towards the final target, and we're trying to do what we can to make sure that also in the private sector, we're seeing those same changes.
Yeah, great. And is this a target that you also talk with other cities, or maybe even at the state level, about to advise them or nudge them to also implement that target?
Yeah, absolutely. I think New York City is one of the first cities in the United States to report publicly our emissions from food, but this is a conversation that we're having with cities everywhere where, you know, reporting on Scope 3 emissions is difficult, but very important, and we have a really good methodology that we've worked on with the World Resources Institute as cool food signatories. So it's something that is very replicable, and we very highly encourage it because it's a way for cities to get a sense of how they can draw down carbon emissions just by focusing on what's on the plate.
Yeah, and you mentioned WRI, World Resources Institute, and the Cool Food Pledge. That is exactly something that as a climate group we're looking into. Can we replicate that, but then at the subnational level? Because a lot of the work on food procurement is being done at the city level, but how can we bring that to states, regions, globally? Bearing in mind that there are cultural differences, for instance. But yeah, good that you mentioned. And it's great to have, again, a great example like the City of New York at Climate Week NYC. Yeah, you talked about some of the challenges already, but I think what is the biggest challenge for you that you had to overcome as a team, or are you still overcoming?
I maybe frame it as like a lessons learned, because we're definitely, I think, encountering challenges in that when we think about a plant-forward food strategy, we want to make sure that it feels culturally relevant, that it feels like something that we are nudging diners towards as opposed to like requiring that. So I think the best like case study for this is our plant-based default program in the health and hospital system. So that program essentially means that patients that are in any of the 11 public hospitals, when they are offered the choice of a meal, the first option that they're given is a plant-based meal. And then if they don't want that, actually the second option is also a plant-based meal. And then if they don't want that, then they can choose a plate with an animal-based product. And I think like it's been such an incredible program, certainly in partnership with Sodexo, and some of the kind of lessons learned have been, of course, investing in the training of staff so that they're having conversations with patients that are educating them on why we focus on plant-forward foods, not just for climate, but also for health and fighting chronic disease. We also took a very like piecemeal approach. We started with rolling this out just with lunch and then slowly moved into dinner. And made sure that the choice architecture really helps diners choose the sustainable option. You know, so we're kind of allowing them the agency to choose what it is that they'd like to eat, and it just makes it a lot easier to choose the green choice. And I'll just share, you know, some of the initial successes through the plant-based program, plant-based default program. We have saved $500,000. We've reduced carbon emissions from the hospital system by 36%. And patients are really happy with the meals, like because they're culturally relevant, because they're delicious and tasty. And Sodexo does such a good job with the menu development. We've seen like a 95% patient satisfaction, which I think is remarkable for a hospital system.
And which I think might go against common belief that many people would have. If you talk about savings, the monetary savings, where are they mostly coming from? So is that a health aspect or what is it?
Yeah, I mean, certainly there's like short-term savings and then long-term savings as well.
Yeah.
I think short-term savings, and Jessica, you probably know about this as well, certainly it's switching to the like whole minimally processed plant-based proteins. That adds a lot of savings. We could get to save taxpayer dollars, which is exciting. And then I think the long-term, which is exactly, you know, the focus on health, like we have a hard time fighting chronic disease in this country, certainly when it comes to diabetes and heart disease. So kind of internalizing those costs and using plant-forward menus to start to fight those chronic diseases essentially means that we're saving costs in the long term.
Yeah. And so the approach, as I understand, and I think we heard this in the first panel as well, is slowly but surely, if I can sort of sum it up, nudging, but continuously doing so and educating staff and people. Yeah. Thanks very much. Going to the third speaker. Welcome also Vice Governor of the State of Minas Gerais, Mateus Simoes. Do I pronounce your name right?
Yes.
Thank you. So you were Secretary General of the State of Minas Gerais before, now you're Vice Governor. We spoke at a COP summit meeting last year as well on this topic of food procurement. Can you tell us what does Minas Gerais do on food procurement? Again, looking at, you know, how can you bring down emissions in food? And we talked a little bit about the health aspect already, and I know that you are a big advocate for that as well, that you always keep in mind the health aspect for foods.
Yeah, for us, at first I would like to say that our governor is going to COP this year, and he will present a whole new strategy of public procurement at a whole, based on our last conversation.
Great.
So that's why Climate Group is always helping us to think about what we do. Minas Gerais is a large state. We are size of France, 23 million people. In Brazil, we have 2 million students in our state public schools. So I serve 2 million kids every day meals in our schools. And we decided some time ago that we'll try to force at the end of our ability the buying local, consuming locally. And for that, we decided that all the purchases should be done by the schools itself. So we do not centralize any part of the purchases of the food for the schools. And they have to get at least 30% of all the money spent in the local farmers, small farmers, so we can try to reach the goals that we have been setting for the last years to the schools. And the results are amazing. We not only are creating a more responsible way of doing the purchase itself, but we are getting inside the families that produces the food itself and try to change the way they produce it. So it's been a very nice experience for the supply of food for 4,000 schools and 2 million kids. And targeting not only the sustainable part of the equation, but the carbon neutrality part of the equation. Because for me, it's important when you talk about procurement, public procurement, to say it aloud, that we have the sustainable purchases, okay, they are good because they have social responsibility attached to it. We have the green procurement, of course, but we have to reach for the carbon neutral.
Yeah.
And we are doing that with schools. It's a huge success in Minas Gerais right now.
Yeah, yeah, and so your food procurement is part of a wider commitment on emissions as a state of Minas Gerais. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is. It's part of what we do with our own purchases. Of course, the private sector is a huge consumer of other part of the economy. But in what concerns food consumption, we are the largest ones.
Yeah.
So we have to do our part in what concerns food consumption in the state of Minas Gerais, and we are doing it as part of the whole strategy of carbon neutrality for 2050.
Right, right. And the example that you gave, so bringing the food procurement closer to the schools themselves or the entities themselves, but also procuring local. Now, Brazil is one of the main producers of meat in the world. So do you think that this example can also teach the world how you can procure in a better way? Is it replicable, do you think, to other areas of the globe?
I think so, but of course, when we talk about the global south, it's important to say that our kids in school are not eating beef. Beef are being eaten in the richest part of the world.
Yeah.
I'm trying to put protein every day on the cafeterias of the schools. And so meat is not really a problem for our schools in poor countries right now. Of course, we have to target plant-based solutions, but we have other stuff that we have to take care of. I think that one of our biggest challenges is not even with the purchase itself, is with the production of the food. So we are very hard on putting all the public effort in helping the small farmers to produce in a more responsible way in what concerns the use of chemicals, and mainly in what concerns the use of water. So we are targeting not only the schools, but the farmers that produces to the schools, giving them technical assistance so they can put food available in the market, not only for our schools, but mainly for our schools, that can dialogue in a more sustainable way of producing it.
Yeah, yeah. And in that way also connecting, again, the production, but also knowledge with the people that consume the food. Yeah.
Certainly, because many of those families are families of our students, and the student will go back to the school and say, okay, I am seeing now how we are producing vegetables or fruits to the school. I see how important it is for my family to have it consumed, to have a local market in what concerns food chain. And I was just hearing about the effect of you stamping the symbol of the Welsh symbol in products in Minas Gerais is the same. So we are trying to make people proud of consuming what they are growing themselves near their houses.
Yeah, thanks. The clock is, well, ticking, but also there's a red light blinking, which also means that we're at the end of this session.
But this does not mean that we will explode. So
no, hopefully not. No.
So that's it.
Just as a quick wrap-up, first of all, thank you very much, all 6 panelists, for all your insights. And I think, again, what we heard is there's a need for collaboration. It's there already, but let's extend it. Corporates and governments need each other in terms of food procurement and how to improve that. We've also talked about how to message it. You can talk about health, you can talk about emissions saved, but mostly of all, the food needs to be tasteful, it needs to be nice, it needs to be good, and step by step, nudging gently, not all at once. And I think this is an approach that we see with other organizations as well. Plant Forward is then the name, usually. So I think in general, again, as a climate group, we want to bring together the governments and corporates that we have in and outside the networks much more, not only on events like this, but in general. So happy to further collaborate with all of you there. And yeah, again, thank you very much, and a warm applause for the 6 panelists of this session. Thank you. And please do follow all the other sessions today as well. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
It's so nice to meet you.
Thanks, Niti, again. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. And let's continue to work. Yeah.